What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Joannis or Joe Hatagwa. I'm a Sierra Leonean American now living in West Africa. And if you want to know why I said you should not move to Africa, then this is the video for you. All right. We are live. We're live. We're live on all platforms. We're live on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. We are not live on TikTok today, but we're live on Twitch. We're live on a couple of YouTube platforms and a couple of Facebook platforms. So, as always, I want to know from you guys, can you hear me? If you can hear me, give me a thumbs up. And also let me know where you're watching from. I want to hear where you're watching from. I want to know if you can hear me, and I want to hear where you're watching from. So, let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and let me know if you guys can hear me. I'm in Ghana right now after spending 11 days on the road between Tanzania for most of my trip, and then a little over 24 hours in Ethiopia. I'm back in Ghana, and we're going to have this conversation. We're going to have a frank conversation about moving to Africa, whether you should or shouldn't make that move. Okay, DJ Bipolar says you can hear me. Malachi can hear me. Cool. Michigan. Dor is watching from Kenya. Dylan Strohs is watching from Dominica in the Caribbean. Nice. Let's see. Who else do we have watching? Where we got people watching from? Annette Mathis says you look like you're in jail. Yeah, I'm in a room with a bunk bed in it. Where I'm staying right now, it has a bunk bed in it, but I'm definitely not in jail. Don't expect that to ever happen, because that is not the life for me. I live on the up and up. We got Alonzo from New Jersey. Who else we got? We got Amanda from South Africa. Okay. What about on YouTube? Can you guys, where are the comments? I can't see. Okay, Anne-Marie Harding's from London. Okay, cool. We got Anne-Marie Harding from London. Cool. We got Yvette Francesca saying good evening. All from London. Okay, nice. So Yvette's from London. Who else do we got? Anybody else from anywhere else you want to say where you're from? Okay, so again, guys, if you're just joining, today we're talking about why you shouldn't move to Africa. Period. Explanation point. Afro Carib, it says hi from Canada. We're going to talk about why you shouldn't move to Africa if you don't do a couple of things first. So moving to Africa is not for everybody. The continent itself, I know there's 54 countries, and in general there are some things that are pretty similar around all of the continent, even though every country is different. Every country has their microcultures and different tribes. Trust me, there are some things that are going to be common throughout, and these are the reasons why you should not move unless you do some things first. So real quick, couple things. Walmsley is calling in watching from Wisconsin. Silvergates Media says peace and blessings from Ohio. Nice. Mark Hansen says what's up from Grandview, Missouri. What's up, Mark Hansen? Few Gem says I'm here soon to be back in Ghana. Nice. Godson Victor Uche is from Nigeria. Nice. So we got Dylan from Jamaican House. You got Prince from DC. All right, so we got people from all around the world. I've seen most of the US, the Caribbean, and Africa. I haven't seen any from Europe, Middle East, or Asia as of yet, not on this live. But we're going to talk about why you shouldn't move to Africa again. So for those of you who are just joining, that's what we're talking about today. So, obviously it's a pretty dramatic title, why you should not move to Africa. And I believe this emphatically, I guess is the phrase I'm looking for, why you should not move unless you do a couple of things first. There are some things that you need to think about, and there's a mindset that you should have, and there are some things you need to put in place before you ever consider moving to the continent of Africa if if you think you should move to the continent of Africa, because there are many people who make the mistake of moving here and they should not have moved in the first place. So we're gonna get into that in a second. All right, so let's do a quick introduction because there's some new people on. I see some new commenters on Instagram and on the other platforms. So let's do a quick introduction so you guys know who I am, and a little bit about myself. My name is Joe Hatagwa. I am a Sierra Leonean American. I live on the continent of Africa, mostly between Ghana and Sierra Leone. I do travel as often as possible, trying to experience the continent as much as I can and to help you guys understand what it's like to make the move to the continent. I lived in Ghana for a little over 2 years, moved to Sierra Leone. I've been living in Sierra Leone since April of this year. And you know, I kind of nomadic at this point in time. I don't have like necessarily a place that I have to stay. I just move around and spend time in different places. Last year, I spent about 5 months in Sierra Leone, 4 months in Ghana, and the rest of the year, the other 3 months traveling around the world. And so that'll continue to happen as time goes on. The percentages of the time I spend in different places will vary and fluctuate. But all to say though, I have been living on the continent of Africa. So there's been a couple of questions. So Filmsy says, "Do not move to Africa?" ? Oh yeah, we're gonna get into it. You should not if you don't have the right couple of things that we're gonna talk about today. Mr. London Boy for Life says, "Do not move to Africa." Yes, that is the topic of today's discussion. Don't move to Africa. I'm gonna say it again, and I'm gonna say it multiple times throughout this discussion because I wanted to get your attention. Okay, there are many people who move to the continent and make a lot of mistakes, and end up having to leave, and or changing their plans. And I can tell you, in some cases, from my own firsthand experience, and then from people that I know personally, what their experience has been. Moving to the continent of Africa has been the worst decision that some people have ever made because they made other bad decisions before moving to the continent of Africa. And so today we're going to talk about the continent as a whole. As I mentioned before, obviously there are 54 countries on the continent of Africa. So most of what we're going to talk about applies in general to the continent. But obviously, as you know, each country has subcultures. And of course, every country on the continent of Africa has multiple tribes, right? And there are different things happening in each country. But I just want to make sure that we cover it as a whole because now that I've been to a few countries, I've seen some similarities, I've seen some differences, and I've spoken to so many people across the board. This is expert opinion from people on the continent. So, Vericities Keys 2020 says, "Hello from the smallest state in the US of A. Can't wait to hear this." Mr. London Voice for Life says, "I think it's important to plan and also do your research before moving." Those two things are true. All right, so we got a full room today. It looks like people are joining on all platforms, so this is good. So let's get into the content real quick. We got, let's see if there's anybody I missed in terms of who's joining and where they're watching from. There's a lot of people jumping in and out of the live. So I'll just jump into your questions and comments as we go along. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 key things I want to talk to you about in terms of why you should not move to Africa, unless or if you do some of these things. So number one is don't move to Africa if you're just coming to make money. Okay, don't move to Africa if you're just coming to make money. Why do I say that? Because the continent of Africa, number one, is big. And there are already many people here looking to take advantage of the natural resources, the human resources, and many of the resources that the continent has to offer. So what we don't need is people who join these kinds of conversations who are generally interested in what's happening in our communities to go with the wrong mindset of coming to the continent of Africa. There's just so many reasons why you don't want to do that. Number one, if you come with that mindset, you are likely to fail. Number two, you're going to end up being just like everyone else. And if you come just for self and with selfish reasons, just to make money, and without having any plan to progress the continent, what you'll do is you'll make it so that it's less likely for other people to have success when they move to the continent, right? If you only come for selfish reasons, which everyone else has done throughout the years, you tend to strip the continent of its resources, and you will eliminate the possibility of others being able to benefit from the growth. And so these are all, so that's number one. Don't come with the mindset of just making money, right? You need to come with the mindset of, if I'm going to come to the continent of Africa, I need to be coming with the idea that, of course, we live in a capitalistic society. You probably do want to generate some income, if not even wealth, but you also need to consider that anything that you do has an impact on the world around you, and you need to take that into consideration. So, so a couple of comments so far. Mark Hansen says, so the title was clickbait. Nah, but you really do have a good point. So I want to hear this. It helps me. Sure. Yeah. I mean, look, this is YouTube, right? I had a friend of mine very concerned on WhatsApp saying to me, is everything okay? Are you all right? But I really do believe that not everybody should move to Africa. I'm dead serious about that. And I'm convicted about this because I've met so many people here that come here for the wrong reasons and come here without doing the right work before they come. And they end up bad-mouthing the continent as a whole, specific countries. And it can be frustrating from time to time. And we're going to talk about some of the things that can happen. And it's just been my experience, having gone through everything that I've gone through this year, with the challenges that I've had, that I've learned from certain mistakes, and I want to pass on those experiences to other people. Mr. London Boy for Life says, also, I feel like people should move with savings, but with an income. Yes, that is true. Mark Hansen says facts. Mr. London Boy for Life says, too many times people move with their savings and don't have no money coming in for them. Kathy Lake says, where do you stay to get consistent, fast internet service to work? That's a great question. Depends on the country, depends on the service provider. But in general, if you want to maximize internet speed, you want to have a direct connection through fiber optic cables. If you have a Wi-Fi, you are going to continuously get a consistent lag. And so you want to have a direct connection through fiber optic cable, and then you also want to have some sort of MiFi as well. So that's just for any country that I've experienced so far. Certain countries do have better internet service from what I experienced, especially people that I've worked with in Kenya, and even Kenya, I think, was the best service that I've seen from companies that I've worked with. Okay, so that was number one. Don't come with the mindset of just making money and without the idea of you're going to have to help. There is going to have to be some kind of CSR arm to your business. Or when I mean CSR, and I don't know the definition of CSR, but I mean like some charitable aspect to what you do. As a continent, we're on the ground floor, or even some people might consider, we're working on the foundation, right? And so with that, you're going to have to bring people along. And so if you only come for self, you are going to leave a lot of people behind. End up with discontent, envy, and then also, just like I said, making it difficult for other people to come along and help. Mr. London Boy for Life says, are you in Tanzania? No, I am back in Ghana. Veracity Key 2020 says, which country would be good for a retired Black woman in her 60s to volunteer work with an organization in need? There are many countries that are good for that. I would say really it's going to be dependent on what your expectations for living are. And then I guess that leads me to number two, is do your research first. And doing your research, there are two ways to do your research. One is this, right? Joining lives like this, having conversations with people who live on the continent. That is super important to understand what it might be like for you or someone like you. So this question, right, from Veracity is as someone who's speaking from a woman retired in her 60s, right? And so I myself don't have that firsthand experience, but I do have people that I talk to who do have that experience. And so you definitely want to talk to those people. You want to also visit often, you know, and that's really number 3 for me, is visiting, you know, because every country is different. You need to know which countries vibe with your experience and your background. Don't move here if you've never visited. That is the biggest mistake you can make. You know, people do this all the time in the States, and okay, it's fine, right? You might move from one state to another. The language is the same. Culturally, it's generally the same. Obviously, you have federal laws and state laws that might be different state to state, but in general, there are many similarities. There's going to be very different if you're moving to the continent of Africa. So you need to visit the continent first, and you need to decide what makes the most sense. Do you want to move to a francophone country? Do you want to move to an anglophone country, right? So a country that speaks mostly French, a country that speaks mostly English. Do you want to move to a Muslim majority country, like Ethiopia, for instance? Do you want to move to a country that is in Central Africa? Do you want to move to a country that's in West Africa, North Africa, Southern Africa, or East Africa, right? Do you want to move to a country that is one that you can get citizenship in, or one that is you're descended from, right? These are all things that you might have to take into consideration. Do you want to move to a country that is a larger country with more opportunities, or do you want to move to a smaller country where you can be a big fish in a small pond? Do you want to have a network first, or do you want to move and start all over again, right? These are all things that you need to take into consideration, but you won't know unless you visit. And if you don't visit, I don't recommend you move to Africa at all. Don't even consider it. Unless you're coming with an organization like Peace Corps or something like that, where they ensure that you build a network, you're insulated in your community, and you can decide to kind of venture out over time and then build from there. But most definitely, do not move to Africa if you've never visited. Don't do it. I don't care what country it is. Don't do it. You don't want to move to the continent of Africa if you've never visited. It doesn't make any sense. There are so many things that you can't have any clue that you'll run into that you wouldn't know about if you haven't visited. And on that topic of visiting, I suggest that you visit a place that is more like a long-term housing. You stay in a place that would be more like long-term housing. So you do an Airbnb instead of doing a hotel. You can stay in a hotel for sure, but stay in an Airbnb, stay in a place's house, because a person's house, because you want to see what it's like to live on the ground. I made the mistake of coming to Sierra Leone, I'm going to say 10 times, and insulating myself from the real world of what it's like living in Sierra Leone. And then when I moved into an apartment, after being in Sierra Leone so many times, I've used Airbnb in Sierra Leone, but I had used it for like it was like more like a hotel. And so I had never really had the experience, like for real, over a week at a time, staying in a house that didn't have a backup generator or solar, that did not have steady running water, that did not have a strong internet connection. And so I wasn't used to living my daily life in a place that had some of these things that access to this was either limited or missing altogether. And that was a rude awakening for me and other people that I've met who've gone through the same thing. So again, I'll repeat this again for those of you who are just joining. Do not move to Africa. 1, if you're coming here just to make money. 2, if you haven't done your research. And 3, if you haven't visited. And visit often. Visit often. Visit more than one country. Visit more than one city in a country before you move. For sure, 100%, these are the things that I would recommend. And let me get to some more questions and comments before I move on to some of the other reasons why you shouldn't move to Africa unless you make some adjustments or if you have a certain kind of mindset. So what you're saying does also stand coming to the UK. Of course, any country, technically, yes, but certain countries have similar cultures and understanding, so it's a little bit easier of a transition. Gospel Peter says, you are right. Thank you. Red Clipperhand, I don't know how to pronounce the rest of it, says, come with organization. Yes. 720 Love says, where are you? They keep asking if I'm in a prison. No, I am not in prison. I'm in a space right now that is meant for a friend of mine's son. It's kind of like his man cave, his space above the house. And so it's built as kind of like a separate bedroom for someone who's an adult teenager. And whenever he comes to visit his mother, he'll be able to stay in this place and have a space of his own. But obviously, he can go to the main house to cook. So the bathroom is right here. It's kind of like a studio apartment. And so I've been staying here, and it's been really great, actually. But I guess because of the bunk bed and the fan here, people think this looks like a prison, because you can also see the shower in the background. Trust me, far from that. If this is a prison, it's a luxurious prison, for sure. So let's see if there's any other questions. As a pensioner, you will be, if you collect your pension in USD, Canadian, UK pounds, or euros, in one of the best positions. Yes, if you do have pension coming in, especially as a retiree. I think that's answering the question for the retiree. Mark Hansen says, so I see you remembered and took my advice about direct connection for internet. I remember chatting with you about it then when you first moved to Sierra Leone. You're right. Menelik says, good evening. What's up, Menelik? The London Boy for Life says, thankfully we have people like you, Joe, on YouTube to help people settle in on the continent better. Of course, Kathy Leak says, Mark Hansen, which direct connection? I need fast, consistent internet for work. Where would you live that is very safe and great internet? Every country is different. Top 10 countries in terms of safety on the continent of Africa, Sierra Leone and Ghana do fit into that list. South Africa is actually on, has strong internet connection, not too expensive to live in, but does end up having to, in being in the top countries for crime on the continent of Africa. But I know some people who've lived in South Africa and have not dealt with any issues with crime. But gun violence is a thing sometimes in South Africa. And so it's just something to think about. But most places that you would think about living in, you don't see nearly the amount of gun violence that you would see in the United States, right? That level of crime in the United States far supersedes many countries on the continent of Africa. I know that people get scared to move to Africa because they're like, oh my God, Africa. You know, you hear about one shooting and you think like it's the end of the world, but in the United States, it's a shooting every weekend. And so those are just things to think about. But in terms of safety, most countries you choose you'll generally be safe. But a good Google search will tell you that in terms of like the Global Peace Index. That's something that you can use and to look up safety. But I would say a soft landing for many people would be Ghana if you have your own income and you're looking for a place where there are diaspora communities and you have easier, quicker access to the United States with direct flights coming to Ghana now, and just overall quality of life. But there are other countries that are a little bit more developed, like the country of Kenya and the city of Nairobi. Many people are talking about. Rwanda's on the come up. Uganda's on the come up. Nigeria, of course, is a massive country with plenty of opportunity. And so there are many places that you can choose, but this is why I say do your research, right? And visit, because it's going to be very hard for a conversation like this for any person to give you the full scope of what it's like to make a move to any particular country without you visiting and seeing what makes the most sense for you. Because in order to tell you what country you should move to, we need to know a lot more about you and who you are and what your standard of life and quality of living should be. And so that would help answer where you should go. If you want a direct conversation with me, you can shoot me an email at the email that you see on the screen here, AuthenticAfricanLife@gmail.com. More than happy to set up a consultation for you to help you figure out what makes the most sense for you and your future endeavors on the continent. Flimsy says, Ghana was the best for you, I'm guessing. You know, Ghana, I would say is one of the best decisions I've made, for sure. I mean, it was a great soft landing for me to begin with, to move to Ghana. But Ghana was not without its challenges, for sure. I mean, I learned a lot in the first 2 years. And as someone, like I said, I had been to Ghana before for the year of return for about 5 days, so it was a short amount of time. I had been advising a company based in Ghana, and I knew Ghanaians. But still, there was nothing like moving to the continent and living there for a couple of years before I really got a better understanding what life was like. Sierra Leone has also been great for me, but in different ways. You know, different countries that have a different impact on me. Sierra Leone makes the most sense for me culturally because I am Sierra Leonean. I do speak Creole, and because I have a network there, and so I've been able to build on that network. But there are challenges that I experienced in Sierra Leone that I did not experience in Ghana. So there were some trade-offs and some things that worked, some things that didn't work, depending on the country. But I would say overall, the best decision I ever made was moving to the continent, for sure. Now, Spirit Warrior is someone who's been coming back and forth to the continent of Africa many times. And one of the things that he said is visit for more than 30 days now, more than once. And I agree. If you visit for 30 days or more, you get a real feel for what it's like. And what I would also say is don't only visit during your country's Independence Day time and or the end of the year, because those 2 times a year is an illusion. That is not how that country operates at all, right? That's an illusion. What do I mean by that? So every country on the continent of Africa, some more than others, have a time where many of the diasporans come back. Generally in Anglophone and even Francophone countries that are generally more Christian, and even the some that are that practice Islam. December is the month. November, December, January are the months where people come in troves to the country, whatever country that might be, because they come back to visit family, right? And they come to do their dirty December, as some people call it in some countries. And just the idea of celebration in that time at the end of the year where people have time off. It's slow at that time of the year, wherever you are working for and wherever you're working and wherever you're living. And you tend to come to the continent of Africa during that time. And you have a lot of diasporans, a lot of pop-up businesses. Businesses prep for that time in terms of service workers and in terms of people on the road in transportation. There are so many things operating at optimal speeds during that time that do not operate like that outside of that time. So when you're visiting the continent of Africa, don't just visit in the December holiday month, and definitely, don't just visit during the December holiday month or whatever that holiday month might be for the country that you're visiting. You want to visit during a slow time, whenever it's not their main holiday season. So like when I was in the Gambia, they told me their holiday season is generally the summer, the winter months for Europe, right? That tends to be the holiday season in the Gambia. In other countries, it's a little bit different, right? So just keep that in mind. You know when the slow months are, and that's a quick Google search. You know the slow months for that country, and that's when I suggest you go and spend 30 days, because that will give you a real idea of what the place is like generally throughout the year, as opposed to the high times and the times that are much more busy. Trust me, it's an illusion to be in any country during the time when there are a bunch of people there. That was something that I learned when I started visiting Sierra Leone outside of the December months. And I spent the rainy season, most of the rainy season in Sierra Leone this year. It was my first time ever in Sierra Leone during the rainy season. And that was an important experience for me because I had experienced Sierra Leone in so many different ways. And that's one thing I had not experienced yet, was the rainy season. Even though I'd been to Sierra Leone so many times, the times that I would come to Sierra Leone, I had never experienced the rainy season before. And if you don't experience the rainy season, you don't know what Sierra Leone is like, because that's a good 3 to 5 months of rain, consistent rain. And that is a really, really important time to be in Sierra Leone, to know what it can be like every year for you. And are you prepared to be around during that time? That's a really important thing. So let me jump back into some of the questions and comments before I get into some of the next things I want to talk about. Afro Carib says, if you are retired and collect pension in euros, USD, pounds, and I guess Canadian dollars, you will be okay. I think I might have already read that. Mr. London Boy for Life says, would you say East, South Africa are much cooler than West Africa? Cooler in terms of temperature? Yes. Cooler in terms of vibe? Everyone is different depending on what you're looking for. I would not say cooler in terms of vibe. Okay. So Knowledge Seeker says, bro, I thought you were in a cell. I was like, okay, yeah. I am not. I'm not in a cell. People keep referring to a jail cell. Does this really look like a jail cell? I'm gonna have to tell Masa that. People keep saying it looks like a jail cell. It doesn't feel like one for sure. I'm above the security post, so the security post is right below me. I can see out into the main street. I'm actually gonna do something similar to this in my property. Right outside from me is the outdoor space that they have here. I can see a pool down there, the tennis court, and there's some other spaces here. But yeah, it's definitely not a prison cell by any means. No. Also, if I was in a prison cell, I'm not sure I'd be wearing what I'm wearing right now. Right? I'm pretty sure you have to wear the orange. And by the way, I'm a little jet lagged. I got in late last night from a little over 20-hour layover. Okay. Roz says South Africa is nice, but xenophobia is there very badly. That is Roz's thoughts. Knowledge Seeker said, I thought immigration got you. What immigration? Where? For what? Come on. What would I be doing that immigration would get me? You know I don't break any laws. Roz says Ghana is best. Yeah. Some people might consider Ghana the best. Some people might. Roz says, I hear Kenya is nice. That is true. I hear the same. I'll be there at the end of the year. If you don't, just don't forget about that. Click on the link in my description. Is it true that Eastern and Southern Africa get cold? I know Eastern Africa gets cold. I went on a safari ride in Tanzania, and it was cold to me. We were up in a hot air balloon, and it was pretty cold. Yeah, I mean, it can get chilly. Kenya can get chilly too, is what I'm told. I mean, look, unless you're right on the equator, the further you move away from the equator, the colder it can be, right? So South Africa is pretty far away from the equator. So you'll notice that there are many South Africans in many videos that you might be watching wearing jackets in their music videos. And then of course the same applies to other areas, especially places that have a desert. Hot during the day, cold at night, right? So anywhere in the Sahel region, especially the desert areas, it can be pretty cold. West Africa can get chilly, but not like cold, but it can get cool, especially if you spend a lot of time here. You get climatized and you can feel like it's a little cooler. So you do want to take that into consideration. But of course, a quick Google search or weather.com watch and type in the name of the country, type in a city, you can see what the range is, the high and the lows, and you can see what the general weather is like. Roz says, yes, it gets cold in South Africa during the summertime, but it feels like our fall season. Mark Hansen says, my question is about safety with its connection to political unrest. Which countries are under threat of overthrowing the government and causing issues because of politics? That is a great question. It's always hard to know which country is under threat because coups are attempted frequently around the world, by the way, but across the continent of Africa. I would say here are some things to keep in mind. History is always an indicator of potential future challenges. So what I would say is this: any country with militant groups in their country, with a leader that is very, very wealthy, without an understanding of how they built their wealth, likely through taking of funds for their own personal gain and use, and opposition parties that speak out and use threats, right? I think those are the three things that you could probably look out for, because that is what we've seen in the 4 coups in West Africa that have happened, and the attempted coups that have happened all around the rest of the continent of Africa. Those are just things that you might want to look out for. So that would be what I would say is what you can think about. Political unrest is pretty normal everywhere. I mean, as you might remember, 2016 and 2020 were hotly contested elections in the United States. And very many people will say that the election was stolen on either side during each election, right? And the 20, yeah, so, and 2024, I think is going to be even more hotly contested election, depending on who ends up being the nominees for each party. And so it looks like the Democratic nominee is already in place, but the Republican nominee, depending on who's in party place, you will likely see that happening again. So that is pretty much everywhere. The level of political unrest, I think, is what you need to think about, and then also the rhetoric from opposition parties, and if there are militant groups, armed militant groups within those countries. One of the things you'll notice about the Sahel region, I think 3 of the 4 countries that had coups recently, military coups, is because there was a bit of a fear on the ground that the people, that the government that was in place was not going to be strong enough to get rid of those militant groups that are tied to Al Qaeda and ISIS that are living on the continent. And so and in those countries. And so in a lot of cases, people want a strong military to be able to ensure that those groups don't grow, they don't take more land, but then also their coziness with the West has been a point of contention for many of the people in the constituencies in those countries, which is why people have been happy about those coups. So a couple more comments and stuff before I get back into the reasons why you shouldn't move to Africa, because I got more reasons. Definitely have more reasons why you shouldn't move to Africa, but I want to answer some of these questions and read some of these comments as well. Roz Chanel says, the traffic in Ghana is awful, so bad, LOL. And I was in different areas of Accra in the suburbs. Yes, it gets worse over time as more and more people are moving to Accra. You're just going to expect to see traffic increase. In this country wasn't built for that many people. I go during the summertime and stay for 2 months. I got the real Ghana feel, trust. I got the real Ghana feel, trust, like trust her. What he is saying is true. Don't go during the tourist time in December. There you go. We got some agreement there. Okie Mute, which is a long time since you've been on. There will be a door of return in Lagos this December, or you mean a year of return? Yeah. Afro Nation is returning to Nigeria this December as well. It is. And then Afro Future, which was recently changed from Afrochella to Afro Future, is going to be in Ghana. So you got competing events now. They were competing events in Ghana. Now you have competing events in Ghana versus Nigeria. So Davido, however you describe him, everybody says his name differently. Davido is what I'll say. Davido will be headlining Afro Future in Ghana. And if I'm not mistaken, Burna Boy is headlining Afro Nation in Nigeria. So you got competing events, I think, around the same dates. Mr. London Boy for Life says Sierra Leone rainy season is bad. OK Mute says Mark Hanson, those coups are mostly in few francophone countries. Roz says it does look like a jail or a dorm room or a separate living spot for someone. More like the two, dorm room or separate spot. Yes. Patricia Matthews is in the house. She says hello from Brooklyn, New York. Knowledge Seeker says, bro, this Africa, you can wear anything in African prisons. Okay, that's fair. You should visit Namibia. It's a beautiful country with clean roads. Nice. Patricia Matthews is looking forward to move to Kenya soon. She also says South Africa gets cold during certain times. Mr. London Boy for Life says, but I see some people in West African countries wear jumpers, even jackets. That's generally the people who were born and raised here, because Hamilton, or the winter season or the rainy season, can be a little cold for people who've been climatized for the continent, right? So what could be like 60 degrees, which is a little chilly, but it can be really cold for people who've been born and raised here. So you'll notice that the people who ride Okadas or the bikes, they wear like bubble jackets, and you know, they layer up, even though it wouldn't feel like it's that cold to you, it's very cold for them. Patricia Matthews says, but at least on the continent, people have options to get around more as a Black person than in America. There you go. West Africa, I would avoid due to what's happening, but I'm glad Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger are fighting for their freedom. I wouldn't say all of West Africa you would avoid. I think the Anglophone countries in West Africa, as correctly pointed out, haven't really had an issue with coups. And there are many countries that don't have armed militant groups that are gaining land, right? So I would say that those are things that you need to take into consideration. Okay, there are a lot of people that have been joining throughout the live on Instagram. I haven't been able to get to all your questions and comments. I am on YouTube though, and I can get those comments there. So you can jump over to YouTube if you want to. You want me to as much as often address your comments. So we've talked about one. Don't come with the wrong mentality of just making money. Sorry, I got a bug to kill. Got him. So don't come with just the wrong mentality of just making money. Okay, so don't come to Africa if you're coming with just the wrong mentality of making money. 1. 2, don't come to Africa if you haven't done your research. That's 2. 3, don't come to Africa. Don't move to Africa if you haven't visited multiple times. And we talked about a couple of ways to visit, right? Obviously, you want to visit during a dry season, or not the dry season, but during a season it's not as popular. You want to visit longer than 30 days if possible. All right. Next, don't come to Africa with an imperialistic or a better than attitude. Don't move to Africa if you're going to think you're better than people here, or if you're going to think your experience supersedes the experience on the continent. Let me be very clear about this. All right, your experience is different. Your experience is not better. Let me repeat. Your experience is different. Your experience is not better. I will tell you from people that I've met firsthand who came here with that idea that because they grew up in the West and because they had spent a lot of time in the UK or in the US, that their experience is better than the experience of people living on the continent. They're absolutely incorrect. It's just different. What do I mean by that? You could spend 20 years in your career doing anything, real estate, advertising, medical field. If you haven't spent one day on the continent, you have zero context for what people deal with locally in each of those industries I just mentioned and all the other industries that are out there. So for example, here's a little mini example just to kind of give you guys just something tangible to think about. I had a 17-year career in advertising in the United States before coming to Ghana to work as the head of advertising at Jumia. Jumia is an e-commerce company, much like Amazon or Alibaba. They call themselves the Amazon of Africa. When taking that role, I did not come there thinking that I was superior because I had already had the experience of visiting the continent. However, I thought in many ways that my experience gave me a leg up, and it did in some ways, and it also put me behind the 8 ball in other ways. What do I mean by that? Number 1, outdoor advertising is focused on a lot more in Ghana, which is something I had a lot less experience in. Radio and television also matter a lot more than what I had initially anticipated. 40% of the country has access to the internet. And so you already are missing out on 60% of the population when you're just focusing on internet advertising, right? And that was something I discovered after moving and after getting my job at that company. And so, and I didn't come with an arrogant attitude, but it still took me a long time to get up to speed. It took me almost an entire year before I was really in the flow and things were moving. And so the biggest issue I've seen people come here with is that ego of I'm better than, and my experience is better than. And I do think diversity of thought is the best way for a company to grow. So I do think it helps to bring in your different, diverse experience, but it doesn't make your experience better. So I do want to mention that to you guys because I've seen it one too many times. I don't want to say it's one too many times, far too many times. I've seen people come here to the continent. And I've met people in different countries who have run into that actual issue. I worked with somebody who worked in Senegal. She was from France. I worked with people who in other countries that were from other parts of the world. and they all ran into people, or they themselves were people who made that mistake. They made the mistake of coming here thinking their experience is better than. Your experience is different, but it's not better than. And the sooner you realize that, the better, because you know, people won't like you if you come to the continent here thinking that you're better than, and it's all over you. Anybody can tell that you think that you're better than, and that will get you nowhere, no matter what country you're in, right? And so I think you want to come, you want to humble yourself, you want to ensure that you understand the you know, the context locally, and you can build and bring in your experience and work as a bridge between what you've learned in the West and what you are learning in West Africa or the continent of Africa. I think it's going to be really important for you to come with that mindset. So those of you who are just joining, because it looks like there's a bunch of people just joining, today we're talking about why you shouldn't move to Africa. But specifically, that's if you haven't done your research, if you're coming just to make money, if you haven't visited often, and if you're thinking that your experience supersedes the local context and the local experience, because it doesn't. It's different, but not better. And I know I keep repeating the same kinds of things over and over again, and I want to drill these points home because I'm living on the continent right now, and I see it every day. And there are many people who do videos like this. I've been having these kinds of conversations over time, and I still see people make these mistakes. And so if you're going to come here with any of these, without doing any of these things or any of the wrong mindsets, don't come. Don't move to the continent of Africa. And that's why I titled this video, Don't Move to Africa, because I much prefer that we have quality than quantity, because we have a lot of work to do on the continent, and every country has its own challenges. And I think that we can do some nation building. And I should say, let me rephrase that, because when you say nation building, I think it almost seems like there aren't nations already here. But what I mean is a nation expansion, right? And helping us get back to the rightful place on the world stage. There are shifts happening, right, in terms of the access of powers all around the world. And right now, Africa as a continent is a pawn in a lot of this. And you know, to keep the metaphor going, I think Africa needs to be back at its place as the king and queen, right? And you know, depending on what you believe, I think technically the king or the queen, both of which in the game of chess, right, are the most important pieces, right? And so we need to see that happen, and the only way for that to happen is if we work together to make that happen. And that's by we, I mean the collective we. There are people from all over the world on this, right? We have people from the Caribbean, we have people all over the continent of Africa, we have people from the States, and we have people from, you know, all the major continents. And so if you're all out there, we all need to work together to see Africa succeed. Okay, so we went through 4, right? So, okay, 1, 2, I'm just re-enumerating these. So the first one was money only. Second one is you haven't done your research. Third is visiting often. Fourth, if you're thinking if your experience supersedes others. And then fifth, do not, I repeat, do not move to Africa. I had to get close to the camera. Do not move to Africa if you don't already have income streams. Unless you have a job that is going to create an income stream and you have the ability to get other jobs if that's what you want to do. The continent of Africa, for the most part, is a continent, well, let's say country, is a continent that operates on cash. Sometimes IOUs work, but in general, doesn't operate too often on credit. Unless you have a credit card from the West and then you use that credit card to purchase something. You're going to need to have a revenue generating machine, whatever that looks like. You need to ensure you have cash because things are going to come up. And depending on where you are, you may not have access to some of the things that you might need. So for instance, my laptop blew out, right? Done. Motherboard's fried. I cannot use it anymore. Now, buying a new laptop was important. How do I get it here? I have somebody coming with it next week. Otherwise, I'd have to ship it. That is going to cost me. So you buy it and you have to pay for it to be shipped. That is a very costly process. Things like that are going to happen. You need to have money. You need to have disposable income to be able to deal with those things. There are other challenges that are just going to come up. There are things that you're just not going to anticipate. You know, you're dealing with mostly developing countries. So if you're dealing with developing countries, that means that there are going to be challenges that you cannot foresee. They're just going to be challenges that you can't foresee. And the only way that you know that is if you're visiting, right? So this is why all of these things tie in together. So do not move here without having income first. Whether there's income coming from the external, you know, somewhere else in the West, the global North, as they say, or income coming in on the continent before you move. But part of the reason why you should visit is to work on that. Okay. So somebody had mentioned nation building is cool. Knowing the language so that your fellow Africans won't fleece you is also key. They view blacks in diaspora as licks. Take it from a person who is of Nigerian descent. So basically what he's saying is people can be taken advantage of if you don't know the local language in a local context. By the way, you cannot learn a local culture if you do not know the language. You cannot know a people if you do not know the language. And so it is really important, as much as you can, to try to learn some of the language in every country. Language teaches you a lot about a culture. Teaches you a lot about a culture. For example, Ghanaians in Tree, they say Mepalcho in Tree, right? Which means please. And so in English, they say please before everything. And when I say that, I think that Ghanaians in general, there are many tribes in this country, they tend to be non-confrontational, subdued culturally in general, right? Obviously, there are exceptions to every rule, but in general, that's how they are. And so it shows itself in the speech, right? If you say please first, you know, before everything, like please, my name is Joe, or please, you know, what time is it? Right? You know, when people use the word please for every sentence before please, even text messages and WhatsApp messages, I've seen people say please before them. So that shows you a little bit about the culture. I'm trying to think of another example of this. I'm trying to think of something in Sierra Leone that helps you understand what it might be like in Sierra Leone. Well, I'll just use because I don't want to use a negative connotation for Sierra Leone, but Sierra Leone is a little bit more confrontational, right? And so when somebody speaks Creole, like I had a friend who speaks Creole and speaks English, and part of the reason why their version of the two languages, they sound different when they speak both languages, is that they were a little bit hesitant to speak English. But Creole, you can be a little bit more harsher with your tone. Like in Creole, I say "wetin," if somebody says something and like I don't understand, that's like saying what, right? But in English, I would say I'm sorry, or some people would say come again. You know, so there's just a different way of communicating, and so we are more confrontational people in Sierra Leone. We are more direct and straightforward in Sierra Leone, right? But that's something that you'll notice if you learn the language, understand the culture a little bit more by learning the language. So it's really important. I think that'll help you understand things a little bit more when you know that. So yeah, I think that is just helpful to know. Manelik says, when traveling or moving to Africa, like any other country, should come with an open mind, ready to learn and take in the customs and culture of the countries they are visiting. Absolutely, 100%. So, and just to go back to, don't move to Africa without money. Rent, in general, most countries that I've spoken to people in charge rent a year in advance. Why? Because the GDP tends to be a little bit lower here, and you can't always trust that people are going to pay rent month to month, right? And so, because anything can happen with someone's employment. And so you want to ensure that you get your rent a full year in advance, sometimes 2 years in advance, to ensure that rent will be paid for that year. right? And so that ends up being a shock for many people. Like, wait, what? I gotta pay rent the whole year in advance? Yes. So yeah, so be prepared to pay rent a year in advance. And now sometimes if you've already been paying rent to a landlord and you've gotten a good relationship with them, they'll take rent 3 months in advance, sometimes 6 months in advance, 3 months in advance. But in general, rent is a year in advance. Cars, you might be able to buy a car on a payment plan, maybe, but it's generally like 5 payments of $1,000 each or something like that, right? Houses, you want to buy land, you want to buy a house. Some companies have payment plans, but again, I've seen payment plans of like 20,000 4 times or 15,000 5 times, right? You'll have these instances where they'll take payment plans, but it's not like you're getting a loan to be able to purchase something. So that's why it's important, if you're going to move to the continent of Africa, you come with cash money and plenty of it. Now, of course, you can live a very modest lifestyle and not buy and rent for cheap. You know, some people pay $1,000 for the year for rent. So that's a possibility. But in general, people need to come with cash. Patricia Matthews says, we from the Caribbean learn to embrace all of the tribes from the continent. And while on the continent, we have to learn to understand each other instead of fighting each other. Yes, I think that is true. We all need to understand each other. So, and a lot of things are in cash, by the way, here on the continent, depending on what country you're in. Every country is different, of course, as I mentioned before, but generally, it's cash. All right, I need to drink some water really quickly. Quick hydration break. So come with money. And then the last one I have for you guys is do not, and I repeat, do not move to Africa to start a business. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. Unless you have a couple key things in place first. So you have to do 1 through 5 first, that we've already talked about, right? Come with the right mindset, done your research, visited often, understanding that your experience does not supersede anyone else's. Make sure you have disposable income and income coming in. Because doing a business in Africa costs money, and many different ways that money and those costs will come up. So for example, there are taxes to do businesses. And what I mean by taxes, I mean certain organizations, certain governmental institutions sometimes require additional taxes. Some people at those places require some kinds of additional taxes. There are going to be unexpected expenses that you're going to run into. It's just the name of the game. And things that don't come up in businesses in the West, like having to buy a backup water supply, having to buy backup electrical supply, right? In many countries, that's going to be required for your business. Sometimes in the US, you just pay a bill and the electric comes, water comes. That's not the same in every country on the continent of Africa. So you need to ensure that if you're coming to the continent and you're going to build a business, you followed all of those first 5 things. And in this, as point 6, you want to ensure that you do have additional income. You have to have money. Almost every successful business I've seen on the continent of Africa has an investor of some sort. You know, I was very impressed by about 6 young ladies that I had met throughout the first 2 years of being on the continent of Africa, who had these businesses that were growing. And I was really, really impressed by these businesses because I'm like, look, this is difficult to do. You know, they had clothing businesses. And as I got to know them, you know, I give advice to businesses a lot. Each and every one of them had a ex-boyfriend that sponsored the business with $5,000 to $30,000, whether that was in the beginning or ongoing over time, just to get over the hump of different issues that would come up, to buy wholesale, to buy in bulk, to deal with shipping issues. to deal with clothes that end up missing at customs. They don't even make it to customs. So, you know, obviously not all of us are going to have that. So you're going to have other forms of investments, right? So whether that's your own personal capital that you're investing from somewhere else to help get your business off the ground, whether that means you get outside investment from traditional investors. You know, I mentioned that I interviewed the folks at Capital Foods, the juice and cocoa company in Sierra Leone, and they got a couple of grants and outside investment and their own investment to build that business. Now, my Instagram live is going to come to an end in just about 10 seconds. So I will go back live again in 10 seconds, but I don't want to start a new topic and leave it off there. So give me a second, guys. We are going to go back to get this Instagram live going again in just a moment. All right, but while it's pausing to tell me that it's done, I'm going to quickly do a screenshot of something, and I need to, so give me a second, guys. If you guys are watching on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, just give me one moment to just complete this process of setting this live up on Instagram. I'm gonna set myself up as a collaborator, and we're gonna go live again on Instagram. So in just a moment, I'm gonna go live again on Instagram with part 2 of why you should move to Africa. In 3, 2, 1. All right, we are back live on part 2. If you're on Instagram and you guys have been following all along on the other platforms, why you should not move to Africa. We've talked a lot about the 5 different key elements in part 1 for you guys that are on Instagram, and then there's a recap for everybody else. Number 1, don't move if you're just money mindset, if you're just money driven. Don't move. You're not going to benefit anybody, even yourself, really, in the end. It's just not going to work out for you. Number 2, do not move if you haven't done your research. Number 3, do not move to Africa if you haven't visited often. Number 4, do not move to Africa if you're thinking your experience supersedes others. It's different, but not better. Number 5, do not move to Africa if you do not have additional disposable income. That is super important. And number 6, do not move to Africa to start a business if you don't think about having money first. And I gave some examples of some businesses, and that's where the last live came to an end. So as I mentioned in part 1 of the live, for those of you who are watching on Instagram, and earlier if you're watching on YouTube and all the other platforms, so all 6 of them all had income coming from other places. Then I've met other people with training businesses. They started their own gym. They had an investment. They had an investor who's a continuous investor or continual investor. Other people that I've known are financing their businesses. I myself have had employees on the continent of Africa since 2020, and I have been financing that with outside income outside of the continent of Africa. Still to this day, I've been financing it with outside income. Now we'll see, you know, as the next couple of months roll around and we got some clients coming on board from my advertising agency, it'll be able to self-fund and it'll be a profitable business. But for about 2 years, it's been a business that has been in just early growth stage, learning, and spending outside income. We absolutely need to have money coming from the outside to run a business here on the continent. And it doesn't matter where you are on the continent, almost always that is the case. Bootstrapping is very difficult on the continent. You can do it, but I don't recommend it. I recommend you do you do have your own money. Also, I would also recommend potentially partnering with someone, right? So one of the things that I noticed that really helps a lot is partnering with someone on the ground who has relationships that you do not have, but you might have a skill set that they don't have. So I had a meeting today with someone who has more work than they can handle. And their challenge has always been they've turned down different opportunities because they haven't been able to do it themselves because they have to be involved in everything. Well, now with someone like me in partnership with me, they will be able to hand off some of that stuff. I can handle many of the things that they're unable to manage and handle, and I have a team of folks that can do some of the things that they're unable to do, right? And so partnering with people is going to help a lot. It can maximize your cash flow, even though you have to split it. 50% of a, let's say, a $20,000 a month company is better than 100% of zero, right? So keep that in mind. So definitely partner with people. It's the best thing that you can do if, in fact, you don't have cash. If you don't have cash, then partner, because partnering with someone is going to ensure that you slow the learning curve, or you make the learning curve less steep, and then you ensure that you can reduce the amount of income you might have to put into it. So let's get to some of the questions and comments that have been coming up. Okay. Patricia Matthews says, due diligence is best. She also says the best thing we should do is save our monies and purchase real estate at home and get a solid lawyer who you trust, who's trustworthy, or find out from the embassies who do travel. Yes, due diligence is best, of course. Flimsy says, do you know of anyone doing drop shipping in Africa? Yes, I am working on drop shipping in Africa. It's very difficult to do because the biggest challenge you have is shipping to the continent of Africa. To bring the price down, you have to ship in bulk. So if you want to do drop shipping, technically, like the real true definition of drop shipping, you can do it through platforms like Alibaba, for instance, and you can have them deliver to Ghana, to a location, and then deliver from there. But in general, if you want to do drop shipping for something outside of Alibaba, and want it to still be cost effective, then you're going to have to be doing drop shipping through bulk shipments. So this is something that I discovered earlier this year. You're going to have to do bulk shipments of a certain number of pounds at a time, and then but that's not then drop shipping, right? And it's more like you have to have things in storage and make it available to people when they buy. Jax Rooch says, can you show us where to get land once in Sierra Leone? I can. Email me at AuthenticAfricanLife@gmail.com, and we can set up a consultation where we can talk about that. Patricia Matthews says, what about starting an Airbnb business and then later on into a resort hotels? Please let me know. Yeah, of course. If you do all the other things first, yes. Right? All the things, I mentioned starting a business last as 6, because you need to do 1 through 5 before starting a business, right? So yes, of course, absolutely. Airbnb business makes sense. A hotel business will make sense if you do 1 through 6 first. Now let's just recap 1 through 6 again before we move. Actually, let me answer some questions, then I'll recap 1 through 6. Okay, we'll get to because love is number 7. So we'll talk about do not move. I will say, spoiler alert, number 7 is don't move to Africa for love. But we'll get into why in a moment. Okay, so Patricia Matthews says, from what I'm understanding, in each country, one has to go to the board to get clearance to start a business. If you're in Rwanda, you need to go to their board to get a license and other materials. I think what you mean is like a ministry of something, or the taxes and things like that. Yes, there are things that you're going to have to do before you start a business with governments, for sure. Yes. Easy York says, never expect some same profits like in the US. Yes, it's going to be different in terms of profits depending on your business. Knowledge Seeker says your volume is off. Patricia Matthews says your voice has changed. Audio is sounding off. Sounds like a call came in. Can you guys hear me now? Oh man, the sound is messed up on. All right, let me know if you guys can hear me. I may have to. Let me hit my mic. How about now? Give me a thumbs up. on YouTube, because Mosey Main says your sound is off. Patricia Matthews says your voice has changed. What happened? Your volume is distorted. The sound is messed up. We can hear you, but the sound is messed up. Is it still bad? Your micro voice. Sounds like AI. Okay. Sound is still off. So let's see if I can get headset and try that. It's weird that my sound just like went crazy all of a sudden when we were all good until that point. Okay, of course I can't seem to put my headset anywhere. We're gonna try it with the headset. Sounds like I'm underwater. Okay, 1 second, guys. If you're watching on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, just give me 1 second to plug in my headset and see if that helps. If it doesn't, it just might be my connection. So you guys are gonna have to bear with me for one moment. We're gonna try a couple things and see if we can make it happen. Okay. I'm gonna try these headphones. See if this at all makes a difference. Sounds like you are talking through a walkie-talkie. Has this made a difference, plugging in these headphones? You said you can hear me, but now it sounds more faded. How about now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Let me know. Yes, better. Knowledge Seeker says better. Sammy128 says better. All right. We're problem solvers over here. We solve problems. So good. See? These are the things that happen here randomly. Okay, I got yeses, yeses, yeses all around. Orlando says you can hear me. Robert Grissom says you can hear me. Sammy says much better. GH Kwame says yes. Patricia Matthews says you can hear me. Easy York says earphones are better. Cool. Okay. Mark Hansen says that's better. All right. Cool, cool, cool. All right. So let me get back to some of the comments that were here. Let me see if I'm missing anything. Okay. All right. So I got most of the questions and comments out the way. Okay. Tombi says, yes, Africa has short winters. It gets cold. RSA is, what's RSA? So South Africa snows in some areas. Winters are like 2 to 3 months. Then we have rainy seasons, lots of thunder and heavy lightning. There you go. Okay. Okay, Sawana says loud and clear. Okay, Manila gave me the thumbs up so you guys can hear me. Okay. So, number 7. Number 7. And this is probably one of the most important ones. Do not move to Africa if it's for love. Okay? Don't do it. Don't move to Africa if it's solely for love. Let me put it that way first. Okay? Do not move to the continent. Do not move anywhere, but specifically to Africa if it's solely for love. There's a couple reasons why. Number one, you're dealing with many countries where they're in the developing world, right? Developing countries, developing infrastructure, developing job markets, developing middle classes. And one of the mistakes that people make is they lead with their heart and not their mind. Use your head, people. Use your head. I read some comments at one point in time. Somebody had reached out to me on Instagram, and they wanted me to try to help them find their estranged fiance. They didn't know the fiance's sibling. They didn't have contact information for the fiance's siblings. They didn't have contact information for the fiance's parents. They didn't have contact information for the fiance's friends. They did not even have the exact address to where the fiance lived. Yet, this was their fiance. Has she been sending money to this fiance? Yes. Substantial amounts of money to this fiance? Yes. Did he disappear without a trace, never to be heard from again? Yes. So to the point where she's messaging me, asking me as if I'm a detective, if I can help her find this long lost, estranged fiance in the continent of Africa. Sammy 12H says that was not her fiance. Correct. So now, not every instance is going to be like that. People do find true love on the continent of Africa. You know, I have dated on the continent. I have friends who have moved here after developing relationships, finding work, and building on. Oh, it looks like we got a slight issue with my potential battery dying. So let's charge that thing up. Okay, cool. We charged. We are charging. But yeah, so you know, if you do 1 through 6, you can move for love. But here are some other things you need to do when it comes to love. Okay. Many people that I've met across the continent equate their love with the amount of money you spend on them. Right. And that's kind of in general. For male to female relationships in a lot of places around the world, but let's speak specifically on the continent of Africa. And so a lot of people I spoke to, especially men, will say, oh, women are trying to scam you, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, we're just dealing with a different environment. You have to come to the continent of Africa with a different mindset. It's not dating in the States, right? Most of the continent is different. Now, they have some qualities that you might find in the West because many people are online. They're following some of the same musicians or content creators or just TV shows and pop culture in general. So there are things that translate across the board. But generally, specifically in West Africa, from my experience, many people expect you to finance entire lifestyles. And many people will expect that of you to begin the process of courting and relationships. And many people will fully take advantage of that and potentially not be serious about you. So, you know, Africa is big. She seems to not know where she is, right? Patricia Matthews says, chances fake lovers will text you or call you from Nigeria since they're the traveling ones and leave the continent the most. Yeah, I wouldn't just say Nigeria, but, you know, plenty of places where it happens. Why people bring Western mindset to the continent is not going to work. Yes, that's true. Flimsy says, love doesn't exist anywhere. It's all about the moolah. I don't necessarily agree with that 100%, but yeah, there's some questions. Knowledge Seeker says, that's my question. Number 7 you missed. No, that was number 7. Don't move to Africa for love. That is number 7. Okay, we got new content. Okay, number 8 says, do not move. So Knowledge Seeker saying as a potential number 8 here, do not go to Africa based on romanticizing about Africa based on books, films, songs, and what people have said, like Africa is the promised land, saying Jah Rastafari had never been to Africa. Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, right? Romanticizing the continent is well. Let me stick on the subject of romance in general, and then we'll get to romanticizing Africa, because I think this is a good point. But I think romanticizing Africa, I'll give some examples of this, but 1 through 6 kind of touched on this though. But let's stick to number 7 first, and then we'll touch on that since you brought it up, and I think it's a good point. So yeah, you know, don't move to Africa for love. Don't do it. Not as your sole reason to move to the continent of Africa. It definitely can be a reason, one of many reasons. If you've done 1 through 6, then yeah, go for it. But do not do it if you haven't done 1 through 6. And I'll say 6 was specifically business, so that doesn't necessarily have to be 1. I mean, 1 through 5 really is the most important. If you do 1 through 5, now let's recap 1 through 5 so we can talk about why, and each one of these kind of are preceded by something that's important. So number 1, come with the right mindset, not just to make money, but to ensure that you're benefiting those around you. You're not just extracting, but you're actually giving back. Number 2, don't come if you haven't done your research, right? You need to do the research on where you want to move, why you want to move there, and as much as you can, understanding what you can about that country. Number 3, visiting often. Not only visiting, staying for longer than 30 days, and also coming during a less busy time of the year, not the holiday season, because that is not a real thing. That is an illusion. No country is like that year round. Number 4 was don't come here thinking that your experience supersedes or is better than everyone else's experience on the continent. Your experience is different, but not better. Okay. Number 5 is do not move here without disposable income. So now I went through 1 through 5. If you've done all 5 of those things, then you consider making a decision to move to the continent, with love being one of the reasons you move. Without those things, don't do it, because you can end up being heartbroken and broke. It's one thing to be heartbroken. It's another thing to be heartbroken and broke. That's just a recipe for disaster. So don't be that. Just don't be that. That's what you don't want to be. Okay, cool. So real quick, I mean, for those of you who stayed on this long, right? We're on part 2 on Instagram. Those of you who've been on every other platform, you guys have stuck along with me. Oh, you know what? Sorry. Well, if you've gotten this far, let me just do this now. If you've gotten this far, we'll get to number 8 in a second. But if you've gotten to this far and you want to support the channel, many people over the weeks and the years have been supporting the channel through YouTube monetization. You could do a badge, or you can always support the channel through YouTube. But because I'm on hold for monetization until November 15th on YouTube, it's actually coming up a couple of weeks from now. You can support the channel by either Zelle or Cashapp here. You see it here on the screen. So you see support by tipping, whatever, it's all there. If you can, and if you choose to, you can go ahead and support there. AuthenticAfricanLife@gmail.com on Zelle, or Cashapp is Authentic African. All right. So Knowledge Seeker had a good point. Number 8. Do not go to Africa based on romanticizing about Africa based on books. Let me see if anybody's, because I always do this. Okay. Based on books, films, songs. Yes. So, you need, if you're going to be following people online, I know a lot of people follow a lot of people on YouTube, Instagram, whatever. And there are a lot of people romanticizing living on the continent of Africa. Like it's all peaches and roses. And they're painting a picture through rose-colored glasses. I'm just mixing all kinds of metaphors here. But it is not exactly that. You are going to deal with challenges living on the continent of Africa. That is just the way it is. And it's not for everyone. Not everybody can take the heat, especially if you don't follow the 5 principles that I mentioned earlier. If you do not, you're in for a world of hurt. And no one likes pain. So do your best to do your research by following channels that talk about everything. You don't want to be following channels that just bash Africa, but you don't want to be following channels that all they do is talk about how amazing it is, because it is amazing and it is great. There also are challenges too, right? And it is better than living in the West for some reasons, and there are more challenges than living in the West for other reasons, right? And so you're going to have to learn and understand which of those matter most to you as someone who's planning to make the move to the continent. But I've always said I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. If I'm going to talk about something that I disagree with you on the continent, or I find as a negative, I'm always going to talk to you all about solutions or things that you can do in your own personal life to avoid those negatives or those challenges, right? That's always going to be the purpose of what I do. But I'm still not afraid to talk about some of the challenges that you see on the continent. And I want to ensure that you know that, because I don't want anybody coming here and then leaving after 3 months, which I've seen happen so many times because people were not prepared for the challenges that you are going to encounter when you move to the continent. All right. So we have this name, which I cannot read Korean, but this person is Korean and says they have Ghana friends and they like Stonebwoy, which is a Ghanaian artist. Nice. So we got a Korean in the house. Nicely done. Andy G says my #1 reason for moving to Africa is a better quality of life. There you go. As long as you follow the first 6 principles, you'll be fine. Lenora, someone who's given me advice on a few occasions. Shout out to Lenora. I'm back in Ghana, if you can't tell. I'm back here, so let's definitely catch up before I go. But Lenora is giving really good advice. Take your time. Don't rush to move. Lenora is actually following her own advice on this. She got her citizenship in Sierra Leone. She's looking at different things that she wants to do here in West Africa, and she's taking a couple years to actually make the move fully. And her recommendation is maybe a year or two to make the decision to move. And she's been coming for extended periods of time, multiple times a year, to really help her understand how to navigate everything and make a decision on where she wants to move, getting all of the pertinent documents prepared and ready. And so I want you guys to all take into consideration to take your time. All right. This has been a pretty well-attended live, I must say, even without having TikTok live, which I need to figure out how to go live on my device and on my phone. For those of you who stayed this long, you guys obviously have found this useful and helpful, and I want to thank you all who have been commenting so far and who've been following along. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on the replay of this video. So make sure you hit the thumbs up so that YouTube can give me love and take me out of the doghouse a little bit so we can get monetization going back up. And then other people can get a chance to see this, right? #1. #2, if you want to support, you can support the channel there. The information is right there. #3, I want to give you guys an update on what has been going on with me. My laptop crashed, so I got a new laptop coming in. So I'll be going back live on laptops. And so I'll be live on TikTok, Instagram, as always, those 2 devices on separate devices, and on my laptop again. So that's the good news. A laptop is on its way next week, end of next week. It looks like some people want a #9. So we're not going to close this thing out. We're going to go to a #9. Okay. So Knowledge Seeker has a #9 that he wants to talk about. And Patricia Matthews wants to talk about it too. But before I do, Abdul Majid says, sorry, it's like everywhere else in the world, speak for yourself. We are a group that travels in the worst places and made it work with or without the people if you are determined. Okay, yeah, I'm not sure your point there, Abdul, but thanks for participating. Okay. Patricia Matthews says, why are Asians moving to Africa? We can't move to Asia without racism. Okay, well, I mean, #1, that specifically is an opinion. To be clear, that is the opinion of Patricia. I'm not going to say I don't disagree with some of that, but I have to be very clear, very diplomatic on these platforms because there are things that I'm doing and things that I'm working on and people that I'm meeting with where I must ensure that I am able to still do those things and still be able to maximize the work that I can do on the continent. But I will say this, during the pandemic, I think we saw, and during the conflict in the Ukraine, I think what we saw there was a treatment of Africans that was shocking to many, not sure why, for countries that were benefiting from the finances and the businesses and the knowledge transfer that were coming from Africans, right? And it's really unfortunate to see that. However, at the end of the day, there's nothing we can do but build our own on the continent, right? I mean, you know, we can complain all day long about other cultures and nationalities and countries coming to the continent of Africa, taking advantage of our natural resources, human capital, not treating our people well when we go to their countries. But if we were to do the nation building, people wouldn't feel like they need to flee to another nation, right? If we continue to do all of these things here that we've been talking about today, that we can ensure, sorry, I'm just being an exterminator, killing bugs here and there, you know, we are in Africa, sorry, get a little distracted sometimes. If I see a bug, I gotta kill it. So it's gonna be on us, right? I mean, this is why part of the reason why I have this platform is because I want to have people of like minds all around the world coming to the continent, visiting, investing, moving eventually with the right reasons. And that's why I don't do salacious content. I don't do celebrity gossip. And that's why the channel grows slowly, right? Because I'm focused on real value, because I want the audience to all become a collective audience, that we make moves together as a group. And then we find other people with similar audiences and we all do this together. And so that's the reason why you guys might find that my content is almost always educational, right? Sometimes we talk about entertainment, but even with that, I try to use a little bit of education to help people understand what we're seeing in that entertainment space. So without calling out any specific people or complaining about people on the continent, because it's really up to us. You know, we can't really be upset with other groups here if we haven't done enough work ourselves here. Right. And so it's going to be up to us. Right. We have to be the change we want to see in the world. So Knowledge Seeker said that had to be a number. Spirit Warrior says, appreciate you. Will this be on YouTube? Have not seen other videos. It will be on YouTube, and all the other videos are live on YouTube. What you can do is when you go to my YouTube channel, Authentic African, all you have to do is click on the live tab. There's a tab that says live, and all the live pre-recorded videos are there. They're always there. They don't ever go away. So you can expect to see them there if you ever want to watch back one of my lives. So Knowledge Seeker says, what about number 9? That was number 9. Others in Africa. We'll say others in Africa. I had a pen that was working great. Now it says not working. Every nation to return to their own countries where their ancestors are from. Oh, other nations hate U.S., even our borders, our brothers and sisters in the continent too. Oh, hate us. Sorry. Okay, yeah, sure. That's Patricia's thoughts. Abdul Majid says, are these suggestions for African Americans only? No, these suggestions are for everyone. The suggestions are for everyone. But, you know, obviously most of the following on the platform are people of African descent, but not African Americans solely and entirely. I happen to be an American citizen, so my accent might lead you to believe I'm speaking to mostly Americans, but I'm speaking to people in the West, but the diaspora in general. Oops. So Jax Roosh says, I did have a concern about the roads. Is that a situation getting better or worse? Depends on the country. Depends on the country. Some countries have really great paved roads. Some do not. So that's just the name of the game. And if you're building here, I recommend you build a road right in front of your place. People tend to be encouraged and do what you do. So if, like, you know, if you have a property that's, let's say 70 feet long, then just build a road right in front of your property. Watch how fast people start building roads right in front of their property. And before you know it, the main road that comes to your side road is paved. Patricia Matthews says, we love our brothers and sisters on the continent, and we want to reunite with our natural brothers and sisters on the continent and leave other nations alone. This is coming from Patricia, who's a Jamaican living in Brooklyn. So you got the Caribbean, which is the sixth region, right? They say they say they're kind of the sixth region of Africa, right? The Caribbean. So we love to see that. We love to see that. She says, bless you, Africa. Spirit Warrior said, I didn't know there was a live tab. There is a live tab. When you go to my profile page on YouTube, you'll find it. And Jerry Campbell says, tapping in late from NYC. Hi, Joe. Hi, all. What's up, Jerry? Glad you could join us. Okay, so we got 9 now, because throughout this conversation, we added, I think, 3 more. So let's go through the 9. 9 reasons why you should not move to Africa, if or unless the following. Number 1, you should not move to Africa if it's all about money. Nothing should be all about money. Obviously, you want to generate an income, but your why should make you cry, as they say. If your why will make you cry, then you'll be able to overcome any obstacle. Number 2 is like, oh yeah, do not move to Africa if you have not done your research. Number 3, do not move to Africa if you haven't visited often, over 30 days, multiple times, and during slow seasons. Number 4, do not move to Africa if you're thinking that your experience supersedes or is better than the continent. Again, it's different, but not better. Number 5, do not move to the continent of Africa if you do not have disposable income, rent, car, fuels, fuel. Everything is cash. And remember that rent you have to pay a year in advance. So obviously you need to have cash. Especially, yeah, just make sure you have cash. Number 6, you can start a business, but if you're going to start a business, you need to keep a couple of things in mind. Top level 1, make sure you have money to start that business. I gave some examples of people that I knew who had businesses that are working really well, but they've had anywhere between $5,000 and $30,000 of investment in their businesses to help accelerate their growth and to be able to deal with the miscellaneous expenses that you could never imagine or think about. Some of the basics that you probably already do know about is in many cases you're going to need to have a backup generator and or solar. I recommend solar. Some people do use generators. I definitely recommend solar. And even some places you need a water supply, right? So that is going to be important. So that was 6. Number 7, do not move to Africa for love. Don't do it, guys. That should not be your sole reason to move. You should have 1 through 5 already down and ready if you're going to have love be one consideration you're making for the move to the continent of Africa. Number 8 is don't move to Africa if you've been romanticizing based on people who haven't visited or only visited once or twice, but people who aren't living here, or people who are only painting a picture through rose-colored glasses. You want to ensure that you get your own experience, which I also mentioned in one of the earlier ones of visiting, to ensure that you maximize your understanding as much as you can before you make the move. And then lastly, number 10 is do not move to Africa, I'll say, if you're going to be upset that there are other cultures who are here on the continent of Africa, especially the ones that have come more recently, separately from the colonizers, as they say, right? Because at the end of the day, those people came here because they saw a business opportunity, and they found a way to make things better for their lives and their livelihood and their families. And if you want to do the same, but then also take a different mindset of treating the employees correctly and nicely, and also ensuring that the people around you and your business are benefiting from what you're doing, then you can compete and then eventually be the ones on the continent that kind of replace those other groups that people are always upset with being on the continent. And I'll leave it at that. So that was 1 through 9. 9 reasons why you should not move to Africa. Excuse me, sorry. Okara says, which is more peaceful, a peaceful place, Tanzania or Kenya? I would say look on the Global Peace Index, it will tell you. We haven't gotten to a number 10 yet, but now the Seeker says number 11, once you have met all of the 10 requires, welcome to Africa. Requirements, welcome to Africa. There you go. I like that. So Andy G says, Africans have to develop Africa because it is our home and want to make it a better place for ourselves and future generations. We have the knowledge, skills, and resources to do it. There you go. I couldn't agree more. Okara says, thanks. Yes. So Okara, just remember, Global Peace Index, you can just Google it. The 2023 one is obviously based on 2022's data, but they tell you which are the safest countries overall, and then even by continent. So when you come to the continent of Africa, it'll tell you. And yeah, I think it's a good idea. Manelik said, you sent me 2 emails. Let me know if you received them. I did receive them, Manelik. I am just now getting back online in a serious way. I was, as you probably know, I was in Tanzania, in the Serengeti, I was in Tanzania, Zanzibar, Serengeti. And so I was just moving around like crazy, shooting content for this influencer trip I was on, the Maximum Impact trip, which you guys know. And so now the work begins on editing that and putting it out. All right, guys. Again, thank you all for watching. If you watched this far, you are a true supporter of the channel. If you haven't already, feel free to send support to any one of these places, AuthenticAfricanLife@gmail.com on Zelle. And then Cashapp is just Authentic African. And with that, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you all on the next video. All right.